I don't think we know what water is.
Mm.
I would also say that based off all the work I've done, like literally by asking water questions, like I've got nothing stopping me from doing anything. And I've seen that there is an intelligence in fluid form that appears to be communicating.
This podcast is called Reconditioned because this is the place where you'll learn how to truly recondition your entire life. Where other wellness podcasts or platforms focus on one particular area of wellness or inner growth, Reconditioned is a one-stop shop for all of it, so that you can get all the information you need to heal and up-level the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects of your life in one place. Because that's what I needed when I was healing from the arthritis I had from the age of 2 that left me disabled by 18. I got myself to a place of complete wellness after a very long journey of immersion into the world of healing, where I learned how to heal the whole self. My purpose now is about bringing that to you, and my Rise membership is an extension of that. For women who want to take their wellness and growth to the next level, there really is nothing out there like it. You'll be part of a global community of like-minded women with access to 14 modules that literally take you through everything you ever need to learn in order to bring your life to a place of balance and abundance. With group coaching calls with me, personalized support, community book club, and so much more. Rise becomes part of your life, your lifestyle, enabling you to thrive in the ways you always dreamed, with me right there beside you, championing you through your journey. It's not always open for enrollment, so if you're hearing this now, it's open and ready for you to enroll. Just go to the show notes for the link or visit laurenvakneen.co.uk/rise. Welcome back to Reconditioned with me, Lauren Vakneen. Thank you so much for being here. I'm grateful to have you back. This episode with Veda Austin is truly one of the most expansive and enlightening conversations I think I've ever had in 150 plus conversations that I've had on this podcast. I've been trying to get Veda on the podcast for about 1.5 years, so I was so grateful that she was able to make it today. And by the time you listen to this, her book will be published and launched, her book, The Secret Intelligence of Water. The reason for me this conversation was so expansive is because Veda's work that I've been following for quite a while is all about how water holds an intelligence, a divine intelligence, almost like divinity, like consciousness, God is communicating with us through water, but we've kind of missed it. We haven't noticed it because we've been too busy just getting on with our 3D human lives. So it's almost about recognizing how, though the scientific community have made it not so in so many ways, the human, the 3D, the physical, whatever you want to call it, and the metaphysical are working together in symbiosis. And for me, so much of the reason that I was able to heal, and that I believe anyone is able to heal, is when we allow those powers to work in symbiosis, the physical human part of us and the divine consciousness all around that is working in this symbiosis, in unison together, but we don't think that it is because we've been taught to see otherwise, to see that there is this 3D physical matter side of things, and anything that we can't quantify can't be real. And as I say in the episode with Veda, my shaman Don Javier always says, the real masters are the ones that know they know nothing. And, I'm of that mindset now, that how can we possibly be so egotistical to think that we do know everything? We are the true masters when we realize that there is so much we don't know. We know nothing. So to start having this understanding around the fact that one of the things we don't understand is how consciousness is communicating with us. And one of the ways in which it is communicating is through water. And Veda Austin has been able to demonstrate this through a decade of photographing water at specific stages of freezing and seeing the messages that water is leaving. So fascinating episode that explains really so much about life, about spirituality, about nourishment, about energy, the way we talk to our food and our water, and how it can then nourish us and how we can give back to it. So absolutely fascinating episode. When you're listening to this episode and this comes out, Veda will be just over a month, maybe a month and a half away from touring in the UK. So I will pop the details for those tickets in the show notes. So head to that right now so you can get tickets for that. Unfortunately, she's not going to London, but she'll be in Surrey, Kent, Scotland, all over the UK, as well as other places in the world. So if you're listening outside of the UK, there are other places she's visiting. I would highly recommend going along and listening to her speak about this, because it is a fascinating subject that for me explains so much about spirituality, about health, about wellness, about being whole. So I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I do. It is 11:15 at night and I've recorded this now because she's in New Zealand. I'm in the UK. I've been trying to get this in for ages and I am buzzing from recording this even at 11:15 at night. And I'm someone who's usually in bed by 9 p.m. So just so you realize just how much this episode has done for me. And I hope it does the same for you. So once again, as always, thank you for being here. Please, if you enjoy this episode, make sure to subscribe, to leave a review, to talk about this episode with your friends, to share it with your friends and family. And just stick around and see what we've got coming up next. Lots of love to you, and I'm grateful for you being here. Here is the episode with Veda Austin. Fun fact, humans take in more information in one day now than they did in their entire lives in the 1700s. No wonder we're overwhelmed. Our brains and bodies simply haven't evolved to manage this level of stress. And until that evolution happens, if we want to be well in mind and body, we need things that help alleviate this stress. For me, one of the key tools in my daily wellness toolkit that does this is the Sensate. And if you've been here a while, you'll know how genuinely obsessed I am with this product. It is a piece of health tech that fits in the palm of your hand, and it basically sends infrasonic waves through the chest to activate the vagus nerve and calm the autonomic nervous system while you listen to the specially composed audio within the app. I usually use the Sensate for 10 to 20 minutes before I sleep to reduce cortisol levels, calm my brainwave states from the hectic day, and send me into a deep sleep. Clients or friends of mine who have a Sensate have told me that their sleep has never been so good. People who usually struggle with sleep just wake up in the same position they went to sleep in. Everyone needs a Sensate, in my opinion, and I particularly recommend it to anyone who suffers from overwhelm or anxiety, and anyone who wants to deepen their meditation practice. And you can get £30 off the Sensate by visiting getsensate.com and using code Lauren30. That's GETSENSATE.com, Lauren30. Thank you so much to Sensate for supporting our mission here at Reconditioned. Veda Austin is a water researcher, public speaker, mother, artist, and author. She has dedicated the last 10 years to observing and photographing the life of water. She believes that water is fluid intelligence, observing itself through every living organism on the planet and in the universe. Her primary area of focus is photographing water in its state of creation, the space between liquid and ice. It is through her remarkable crystallographic photos that water reveals its awareness of not only creation, but thought and intention through imagery. Veda, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome. I've been so excited for this conversation. We always start with the same conversation, with the same question here, which is, what have you done so far today to support your wellness? I know it's super early for you over there in New Zealand, but what have you done so far today?
Well, you can probably see that the sunrise is just coming up on my face. So I've been awake for about an hour. And the thing that I like to do for my wellness, and it's just, I guess, my mental wellness mostly, is to have a cup of tea in my favorite cup. And people always laugh. And sometimes when I am on podcasts, I'm drinking out of this cup, and oh my God, I'm drinking out of the SpongeBob cup again. But, there's these little idiosyncrasies we have in life, and I just like the thinness of the lip of the cup. And I think my daughter found this at a secondhand shop and she gave it to me. So it has sentimental value, and a cup of tea always makes me feel better. My mother, when she was alive, she would always make me a cup of tea no matter what. The kettle was always on. So that's always such a comforting sound for me. So although I haven't had much time to do very much, I also did some crystallography, which makes me always happy.
Firstly, are you sure you're not British with that tea situation?
Well, my mother was actually from Devon. So
there we go. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So you've done some crystallography this morning. What I think I would like to start with is, how does one come to be a water researcher?
Well, one has to become curious, I think, about what is water, this question, what is water? But for me personally, I had a healing journey after a very bad car accident I was in. And that healing journey involved discovering a very specific water here in New Zealand, which came from a deep aquifer. So it's this gorgeous artisan water, and it had a very naturally high pH, which means power potential of hydrogen, which was around about a 9.9. Seasonally, it can change a fraction. And without getting into all of the huge detail, I had been in a horrendous car accident. We went under a 7-ton truck, rolled twice in the driver, was decapitated. It was really one of the worst accidents in New Zealand where someone survived. And that was me. And over the course of, 20 odd years, I'd had 8 surgeries. And on the 8th surgery, which was for bowel surgery, because the seatbelt crushed my internal organs, I was surrounded by doctors when I woke up, and they said, well, you didn't recover well, and now you have showers of blood clots in your lungs, and you have to be on warfarin, which is a blood thinner, potentially for the rest of your life. And I was in my early 20s. I was really shocked because, other than the accident injuries, I've always been healthy and well and fit. So it was very surprising to me. So they said, you're going to die if you don't do it. So I did and took warfarin for several months until I had a X-ray, which said there are no more clots in your lungs. They wanted me to continue, but I made a decision for myself. There's no medical advice at all. This is just my decision to stop taking it. I already knew my body could heal. 3 doctors had told me I'd never be able to have children based off all of the injuries I had from the car accident. And so I had literally had a child for every doctor that told me I couldn't. So I already knew that just because someone tells me something about my body doesn't mean that my body is necessarily going to adhere to what they said, unless perhaps I believe it. And so I have a wonderful ability to put some things on the shelf and just say, well, that's what they say. That's not necessarily my truth. So I spoke to a medical doctor friend of mine who also practiced Ayurvedic medicine. And I said, look, what can I do to best keep my body healthy naturally? And he offered various different types of advice. But the most interesting to me was that he said, well, just off the record. I'm like, oh, well, why are we off the record here? He said, if you can find a natural, emphasis on natural, not ionized, naturally alkaline water, that might help to stabilize your body. So I thought, gosh, that sounds about the easiest thing you've suggested so far. Because in New Zealand, most of our spring water is alkaline. If sometimes, not always, but sometimes our rainwater is alkaline. So I started trialing my body on 2-week trials to see whether or not I'd see any difference. And it was easy to find in spring water, which had a pH above a 7. And so, other than feeling hydrated, I didn't really notice anything particularly much. By this time, I had a wellness center, and a client came and she said, "Oh, I know this old guy. He's got his own private source of naturally alkaline water. It's like 9.9 out of the ground." I'm like, "What? I never heard of such alkaline water." And she said, "Yeah, he's only giving it to cancer patients, and he's having really big success, and he might give you some." So I went to see him, and he gave me a month's worth of water to drink. Day 3, I noticed a huge change in something many of us do not want to discuss, which is bowel motions, but it's an indicator of our internal health. There's all these people sitting on the toilet trying to push out a pebble and for an hour, and that's surprisingly common. And yet it's such a classic symptom of dehydration.
Mm.
And then on day 10, I noticed all these bumps coming up along my arm and jaw that were really painful. And I knew my body was purging, but I really didn't know what was going on. And there was one bump that just seemed so angry, and it felt sharp when I'd put my finger across it. And I know this sounds gross, but I got these tweezers and I pulled something out, and it was a little shard of green glass. And between day 10 and 12, I pulled 27 pieces of green glass out of my body from my right side, from my right arm and right side of my jaw. And it had been in my body for over 20 years because the man who died in the car accident owned a nightclub, and in the back of the car were crates of Steinlager beer, which a lager in a green glass bottle. So when the car rolled, my right side got green glass and the left side got my windscreen. And I knew I had glass in my body, but I didn't realize it was all still like lodged in there, or a lot of it was still there. The nurses had spent 3 days picking glass out of me. So it was really quite shocking that 20 years on, just drinking a special type of water could purge me like this. Then I started trialing different people in my wellness center, and everybody started seeing really interesting results, from that incremental little bit of extra energy for the athletes all the way to the people who were extremely sick. And one guy did a 27-day water fast because he had stage 4 cancer. And 2 weeks after his fast, they called it spontaneous healing. So everyone's eyesight improved, which was fascinating because our eye lens is 99% highly ordered structured water. So we literally see the world through the lens of water. And that led me to ask the question, what made it different? So you go to an analysis and it says, yes, it's got this much bicarb and lime, which are some of the reasons it's alkaline. But what do we learn about that? So I started to realize that when asking the question, what is water? When you go to an analysis, what it does is tell you what's in the water. So you say, well, what is water? And the scientist would say, well, it's H2O. But someone else, and that someone else told me this, well, they said that the 2 hydrogens are feminine in the mode of levity, and the large oxygen is masculine in the mode of gravity, and together they create liquid water on Earth. And at the same time, without us really starting to look a little deeper into this question of what is water, we really don't know who we are, because by molecular count, not by volume, we're 99% water molecules. There are more water molecules in our bodies than every single person on the surface of Earth, and there are more water molecules in our body than all the stars in the Milky Way.
Wow.
So that fascinated me because, I started to see water differently. And then I read Masaru Emoto's book back in the day, Messages in Water, and although he wasn't embraced by the scientific community, he really opened the door for people to see themselves as bodies of water, sensitive to thoughts and sounds and feelings and all of these things, and environment. And he did that with, about 8 very famous contrasting pictures. Then there was Laurent Costa, and I always recommend people look him up. He is a French microscopic photographer, flash freezing water in a similar way to Emoto, except that he never wanted to experiment on the water, because water to him was his spiritual teacher. He wanted to just see what water might do. And so sometimes before he would flash freeze the water, he couldn't help but smile at it. And so when he looked down the microscope, he was literally seeing smiley faces smiling back at him in the ice. It formed into the shape of a smiley face, like 2 eyes and a nose and a smiley face. And he was seeing fish, he was seeing hearts, he was seeing things relative to his thoughts and also relative to things that had happened in his day or things that were nearby him. And other than seeing geometries, of which he saw like Emoto, seeing art in ice fascinated me, because outside of being a researcher, I worked professionally as an oil painter for many years, so I see the world through the lens of art. And art is actually extremely sophisticated. So, and it's also very, very human in many ways, which is not to say that art isn't all around us. Of course it is. The world is a masterpiece. And I think water is the artist. So when I think about art, I go all the way back to how humans share what's inside of them, outside of them, on the walls and caves. We get to understand what humans were like, their thoughts, what they saw through art. So it's a really important piece for archaeology, for example, to be able to understand what life might have been like, what animals were there based off the art that humans designed, and maybe what they were feeling, what they thought. And so to see art, literal art in ice, was really remarkable. And lastly, this is a very long-winded explanation to your question. There was a radionic engineer by the name of Thomas Hieronymus, and he made a really interesting observation that when he went into a Parisian meat market on a very cold day, he noticed that the freshly placed organs of an animal appeared to be affecting the way the frost froze on the glass behind where they were placed. For example, the frost would freeze into the shape of a liver organ above a liver organ and into the shape of a heart above a heart. And he put that down to there being water in the blood. And water is always in communication with itself in all of its various stages. The least communicative, or the least, the one with the least ability to store or absorb information is when it's a solid. That's where it's really in sort of like a state of suspension. But within all of the other stages, there's this information exchange. And so the freezing stage is a wonderful stage because it's not when it's frozen solid, it's more this in-between stage between a liquid and a solid. So essentially each organ had a sonic signature, which is an imprint for form and function, which was somehow sharing information with the water in the air, which often doesn't get thought about. And then the water in the air took that information and became in form above it as it hit the glass. And that fascinated me because 10 years ago, I wasn't working with a microscopically. I was doing other kind of research. But I did have a glass petri dish, and I could see that the secret was in the freezing, where the unseen becomes seen. And I thought, well, does water really, have what we term as memory? Is it able to store information? Is it real? So I got my petri dish. I put some of the water that helped heal me in it. I've used all kinds of water since then. And I was thinking, what shall I project a thought of? What will the thought be? And there was a bit of fluff floating around in the dish. So I put my hand in to take out the fluff. And I thought, oh, I wonder if my hand will have any impact on the water's memory. So I thought that thought will do. And I put it into the freezer with the peas and broccoli and everything else. Pulled it out about 4 hours later. This was when I froze water solid. I have not done that in nine years now. And I held it up to the light and I took my first photo. And the image looked just like an X-ray of my hand. It took up half the dish, which is macroscopically huge. And so people know it's not pareidolia, over the course of the last 10 years, I have done close to 53,000 photos of water responding intelligently. In the early days, even when I froze water solid, I still got clear imagery. It's just clearer now that I have the new technique. But Dr. Jerry Pollack recommended that I put a survey together whereby there be 25 photos of the ice. And the question is, what does this look like to you? So it's not a leading question. I made it into an online questionnaire, friends distributed, so people didn't know it come from me. People didn't even know what I was really doing back then. And they didn't even know what they were looking at. 298 people did the survey, and 85% of people were able to recognize the ice imagery for what the influence was prior to freezing. And 100% of people were able to recognize 3 images for what the influence was, and the hand was one of them. So that is how I got into water crystallography.
So sorry to interrupt the episode, but this really is a public health service announcement. If you're trying to improve or optimize your health, you might be missing the crucial ingredient that most people don't realize they need. You see, it's not vitamin D you need to be supplementing. The mineral we are most lacking and need so much more of in order to be able to synthesize that vitamin D from the sun is copper. Without copper, which gives us retinol, we literally cannot absorb the fat-soluble vitamins A, D, and K. And the iron in our bodies is not distributed effectively because copper is what transports iron around the blood. So it's not that we're anemic, it's that we are low in copper. Without adequate absorption of all these minerals, your health can never be optimal. So many people I've worked with feel like they've tried everything, and simply introducing Recuperate IQ, which is a very specific formulation of copper and other ingredients, improved their health within weeks. It's formulated by Morley Robbins, who created the root cause protocol that hundreds of thousands of people around the world have healed as a result of. I've personally been doing it for 8 years. This supplement is finally available in the UK after years of me trying to get hold of it, and you can now get it at yourhealthbasket.co.uk using code LaurenV10 for a 10% discount. That's yourhealthbasket.co.uk and code LaurenV10. I mean, just fascinating. So niche, but also not. As you and I spoke about, homeopathy has been a massive part of my healing journey. In the 80s, even when it was considered fringe, it was the first treatment plan that, when my parents opted out of conventional medicine for, this child with an autoimmune disease, we went for homeopathy, and it saved my life. And as a child, and a young child, as an infant, I don't think the placebo effect is necessarily relevant. I do believe in the placebo effect, but later on, I learned about homeopathy, and as I mentioned earlier, I ended up working with Homeopathy UK, and being able to be around incredible minds in the homeopathic medical world, who understood that the power of homeopathy was down to the power of water memory. And through that, I've been absolutely fascinated with the intelligence of water. So when I came across you, and I've been following your work for a while now, it was just fascinating to me. And obviously I'd seen the work of Emoto and heard of Gerald Pollack, and, reading what I can, but your work's kind of taken it to another level. So I have many questions for you. I guess the first one is, what is it you're finding in water that is making life make sense?
Life. Yeah. Life is what I'm seeing in water. What I'm seeing is that I'm not working with something that has no ability to respond. I'm working, or react. Like what I'm seeing are reactions and responses. In the ice, which is kind of like where we see a like a snapshot of what how water has responded to, you could say, stimuli, whether that's an emotion or whether that's, a picture or whatever. So what I'm seeing is that, well, firstly, I'll say that I don't think we know what water is. I'd also say that based off all the work I've done, like literally by asking water questions, like I've got nothing stopping me from doing anything. And I've seen that there is an intelligence in fluid form that appears to be communicating. And that might sound so outrageous to someone who has been brought up in a really scientific way. But many of my the work that I've done with water, I don't like saying experiments. I'm a body of water that doesn't want to be experimented on. I see that water responds in most extraordinary ways. There's no part of me that thinks about what I'm doing as experimenting. So I tend not to use that word. However, I would say that an example would be this. It's kind of a crazy example. Someone was saying to me, can you manipulate water? Can you trick it? And years ago, I was like, okay, I'll see, I'll give it a go. I wouldn't do that now, based off the very, very confronting ice image that I got from that. So I got some beautiful spring water, and I simply said, can you please show me? I know this sounds nuts to some people. Can you please show me something extraordinarily beautiful, something amazing, just between me and you? I will not share it. It's not going anywhere, just a very private share. And so I immediately put it into the freezer before I started feeling really guilty, because I was not intending on keeping it a secret. I was intending on sharing it. I was lying to the water. And it doesn't come naturally to me, so it felt really horrible. And so all the while, as it's beginning to freeze, I'm thinking, oh, it's probably going to be so disordered. I feel so bad about doing this. Like I shouldn't have accepted, that person's, request. But anyway, when I finally pull it out and take a photo, I do see some disorder. But within that, there are two very, very, very clear letters. And together, they said N-O. And right in the middle, it said no.
Wow.
And whether that was a coincidence or whether it wasn't, it was enough for me to go, oh my God, I'm never doing that again. Now, I've had water show me things like when I've asked, do you know my name? I've clearly seen my initials in the ice. When you compare them to my initials, they're so similar. And I've repeated that. There is one where I was missing my mum, who died in 1999, and I said, "Can you please connect to my mum?" Now this is verbal dialogue, right? I've done thinking too. I've done words. I've done all kinds of stuff over the last 10 years, but and I was just really feeling into mum, and so I said, "Can you connect to my mum?" And froze the water. And the imagery in the ice was remarkable because, firstly, it was something that I knew about, that people around the world didn't know about my mum and I. And my mum and I had so many memories. It could have been anything, and I had no idea what I would see. But I used to live in Japan, and mum and I would write letters to each other, physical letters. It was before cell phones and emails. They sound prehistoric, but anyway, so at the end of every letter, she would attempt to draw a circle, and she'd do a little heart in the middle. And the circles of my mum were so bad, they looked like maps of Australia. They were never round. And so when I pulled the ice out, I had a misshapen circle with a heart in the middle. And
Wow.
every year on her birthday, I ask the same question, I get the same response. And for someone that says, now you're projecting, then this year I said, could you please connect to my mum for my sister and I? And this time we got 2 misshapen circles with hearts in the middle, which is all in my new book, because that to me is really, really something. But I've seen this so much, and all the most extraordinary things, that it's well beyond me questioning it anymore.
Mm. Do you think it is God, divinity talking through water, or is water an intelligent divinity in its own right, or do we not know?
Well, I think that there is a collective consciousness.
Yeah.
I think when you put water and consciousness together, they're so intimately intertwined that they appear to behave as one. I
Mm.
often say that water is a lighthouse. And I've also said that water is the house of the divine. I
Mm.
say it's a lighthouse for a very specific reason. Water is only one part matter. That is the hydrogen and the oxygen. The rest is photonic light. So water really is a container of light.
Mm.
And an Indigenous woman said to me once that she could speak to bees, and she said she would watch their hives for long periods of time until a bee came out and communicated to her and said, we don't mind looking at you looking at our hive, but please don't look at it for so long, because your conscious expression is putting too much light in the hive and we like it to be darker.
Wow.
So where we put our light, is also where we're putting our conscious expression, and it's the other way around as
Mm.
well. So that was really interesting to me, because when I opened the freezer at the perfect time, just as the water's is just starting to freeze, but before it's taken over the whole dish, it sends these little shoots out, usually from the side, but not always. And the little ice shoot, I've filmed and photographed, there is a light that you can see that comes out of the tip of the ice, like a halo or an aura. And I actually think it's light that paves the way for the design of the imagery, and water essentially freezes along its path. So water and light are, I've started to say this because I think it's appropriate. Whereas if water was the holy grail, then light would be its contents.
Mm.
And this the light part, I think, is the way the information exchange happens, where water isn't just interested in what we're thinking. In fact, I would say it is much more interested in what we're feeling, because there are many times, and you and I mean, I'm quite happy to share this, but we tried to get on a podcast a few days ago, and I was too upset. I was so upset about something personal that I couldn't do the podcast. That's how upset I was. And on that day, I attempted to do some crystallography, because sometimes I find it therapeutic, but on that day, I had a commitment to someone to do some crystallography. And this has happened several times before in my lifetime now, well, over the last 10 years of doing this work anyway, where this particular person had wanted me to do some work with some essences and some flower essences. And so I was putting the flower essences in the water, and I since this day, I've seen the flower essences show imagery of the flowers. But on this day, the day that we were meant to do this talk originally, all I saw in the ice were sad faces.
Mm.
It just showed me how I was feeling. It didn't design anything I was trying to get it to do. All it did was show me that it saw me. And
Mm.
so I know I always have this friend that genuinely sees me. And,
Wow.
I find that personally comforting. I think because it's happened so many times, it's a comfort now. It doesn't freak me out. There's a lot of people that find this work like, oh, it's like, how do you cope with the shock of it. Well, to be honest, if your skin was invisible and your organs were see-through, like what would you look like?
Mm-hmm.
What are you looking at me with through? And so we look more like tributaries with streams and rivers and waterfalls. When I ask that question to some school children, because I go into schools sometimes to teach science and art together, like a with water project. I asked the question, and one boy said he looked like a brain-shaped cloud with electrical rain shining down in the shape of a person.
Wow.
And the children get it. They really do. So, I think that what I'm seeing is a fluid intelligence, and I've also said it as the house of the divine, because I do think that divinity and water are always together. Whether one is God or one is separate, I don't know. There's a million questions.
Yeah.
So people ask me that I just have to say I don't know.
Mm.
But after observing closely and being so prolific with what I do, I've noticed a couple of things. And one lady, and I think it's when the people with the most genuine hearts, who are often just so open and curious, that get such like clear messages in water. And this one lady, her mum had recently died, and she said, is my mum okay? Just that's all she wanted. Where is my mum? Was the question. Like, where is my mum? Is she okay? And this was her first time doing the crystallography, because anyone can do it. And so she was using a Pyrex glass baking tray instead of a petri dish, because usually I recommend glass petri dishes, but I say you can use a glass, baking tray if you're desperate to start. And so in the ice, she sent me a photo, and she said, I didn't notice it at first, and then I couldn't unsee it. It's so good. She said it was just helped her so much, because her mum was quite religious, and we're all on different journeys spiritually, but it meant a lot to this lady. And there were clear letters, like literally, I think it's even in here. I'll see if I can find it, but just G-O-D. It just said God.
Mm.
And that was the message that she needed to hear from
Mm-hmm.
water. Now, I've said a couple of things in English, but I've seen words show up in different languages. Then one particular one was fascinating, where I spoke the word Yeshua because somebody had asked me to do it, and I got this incredible kind of vase shape thing, and then there was this really interesting little writing in there, and I was like, oh, that looks like some kind of like writing, but I have no idea what that means. So I put it on social media, and I said, does this look like I said something like, this might sound crazy, but does this look like anything legible to anybody here? Over the course of 3 days, 1,000 people reached out to me.
Was it like Aramaic or something?
It was Aramaic. Well,
Right.
yeah, no, it was Hebrew. It was Hebrew.
Right. Oh, right.
Yeshua.
Wow.
So I've seen some pretty wild things
Mm.
in my time. Yeah.
For anyone listening who's listening to this thinking, I'm loving this, but I'm very pessimistic, and I've been on a shamanic apprenticeship for 3.5 years, and something my shaman always says is the true masters are the ones that know they know nothing. And I try to live by this, because I think the more we realize that we know nothing and we can't possibly understand creation, and we can't possibly think that we have answers for everything, and if we're open to learning from in different ways, then that's what's going to continue us on this path of spiritual evolution. And so for me, being able to hear what you're saying, that there is this consciousness, the collective consciousness that is able to communicate to us through water, that just seems like not normal, but it just seems like, okay, yeah, that makes sense to me, that we missed that for so long, but actually that just makes sense. And for anyone who is pessimistic, I just would urge you to remember that we can't possibly know everything. And just because we've been taught something and we have, our brains thinking in a certain way doesn't mean it's so. So, you were mentioning about the different languages. And one of the questions that one of my friends wanted to ask you, who's a big fan of your work, and it was a great question because it's something I've thought about as well, is your pictures that you post and all your stuff on social media. And for anyone listening, you must all follow Veda on social media. Do you believe that water is communicating with us in the language that we know? So, for example, the words that you get, how does it know to, write no? Or how does it know to do a smiley face or a sad face? Is it because it's what our consciousness is going to recognize?
Yeah, well, I think the easiest way to answer that is that there's loads of stuff I don't know. But what I've observed, and I can say what I've seen, is that because now I've taught thousands of people how to do this work, and I also share their work just so that people realize it's not just me that this happens with. I've seen that water responds to you in the way that you most require or understand. So the answer I would say would be yes, water will respond to you in the way in which, also in your kind of nature. So, for example, there are 3 things you might see when you do this work. You're not necessarily going to see art. I'm an artist, so of course water is going to show me artistic expressions. But there are 3 things, and this is important for people to know, because some people might go into it and go, well, I'm just going to, put my glasses, for example, into the Petri dish. I'm holding my glasses. I'm going to put them into my Petri dish, and then I'm going to see my glasses. And if it doesn't happen, then this is all, crap. Okay. And that would be fair enough if you haven't actually listened to the whole podcast, and that's what you think will happen. But this is actually relational. So I would also suggest, my father is native New Zealand Maori, and many Indigenous cultures have a relationship with the elements and with water. So for us, water is a relative, not a resource.
Mm.
There is our ancestors are in the water.
Mm-hmm.
And New Zealand was the first country in the world to give a river rights of personhood based off those Maori tribe fighting to be able to protect it. So there is a very deep cultural aspect here that weaves through this tapestry of relationship within this work. Mm. When I approach water, there is a specific way I do it. So I will give an example. When you go to a petting zoo or like a farm, and in New Zealand, we have lots of deer. So often they'll have deer or they have emus, or they have like possums or sheep or, whatever. But, I'll give a deer as an example. And you go and you can pet the deer and you can feed the deer. And it's like, oh, he's so sweet. Or you can hold the bunny, whatever. And you go away, had a nice day. Lovely, great. And then you get on with your day. But I'd like you to compare that to going to a forest on your own and really feeling into the nature, and then seeing a deer is looking at you, from around the tree, and you're like, oh my God. And it's like, you have that feeling, and then that might approach you. Maybe it will even eat out of your hand, and that experience will change your life, because you go, oh my God, I will never forget that for the rest of my life. And the only difference is that we know that that animal was wild, and that we created an environment safe enough for it to come to. So that would be the way I take the approach with water, is not to expect it to do what I want, because then it won't work. Mm-hmm. People think, this is what we do as humans. We tend to try to control everything, but this is not the approach with this work. Water doesn't design for me like that. So there are 3 different ways. There's a signature pattern. So I've identified various different signature patterns that reoccur and repeat using specific waters with no influence or no intentional influence. So rainwater tends to look like a fanning pattern with a curve. Tap water can be very disordered, like lots of lines and dots, like Legos thrown all over the floor. Filtered water tends to have compacted lines together, like a filter. Spring water tends to form what I call a star fern hexagon, which looks like a six-pointed star with ferns coming off each end, which forms a hexagonal shape. And so, you can go on. So you'll see either a signature pattern of your water, an artistic expression like I do, or you might see hydroglyphs. And hydroglyphs are where I'm getting more attention, because to say I have one hydroglyph essentially means I have to have seen it repeat using a wording influence, and not just English, at least 50 times to say I have one. So what I've come to slowly see is that, and I've been doing this work with hydroglyphs, I've just called them hydroglyphs for the last 5 years. I have 45 patterns or symbols in ice that I can recognize appear when I use a specific word. And I have a team around the world helping me with this to use the same word in their language. And interestingly, for example, when we use the word water in English, compared to the word water in Hebrew, like one letter in Hebrew means something. Mm-hmm. So it's very deep and complex, where we'll see the same symbol, but in Hebrew we'll see other little symbols that we're still getting to understand. So I can't do this work without the help of people around the world that learn the technique. Nor am I telling people from any scientific perspective how this is working. I invite science to help me. I invite people to come on board and go, well, she is actually showing a phenomena. She can show clear repeatability in these two circumstances. Art, even in art, I've seen very interesting things. Like when I melt the ice after, for example, it's designed an image of an apple. I can melt the ice and then I can refreeze it and see the apple image can still be there. So not only is it, forming a coherent image, but that image can be repeated. Not always in the art does it do that, but with biological things like a seed or a drop of blood or saliva or urine, things like that, things that have become from a biological source within like a biological source seem to leave a longer imprint, like especially seeds. So water reads potentials. So the seed, if I put like an apple seed in the water, it will design and read the potential of the seed and design the outcome instead of the seed. So it will design the apple. The sunflower seed, it designs the sunflower. The flax seed, it designed the pod of where the seed came from, which is like the fruit of the flax. So I've seen this happen so much. And even in the oldest, shriveled up like seeds, there's still 10% water. And it is the water that stores the memory. And I'm beginning more and more and more and more to believe and think that the concept of the Akashic records, of something that contains and holds all information of past, future, and now, and for me, it seems an obvious answer to say that it might be water.
One of the holistic living challenges I spent years researching and trying to figure out was how to keep teeth healthy without fluoride, and which fluoride-free natural toothpaste to use. I've found a few over the years that I've liked, but I've finally found a brand that does a toothpaste that me and my husband love, and a kids one that not only has all the perfect ingredients to keep their teeth and gums healthy naturally, but that they love. The toothpastes are by Wellness, which is the brand created by Katie Wells, aka Wellness Mama, who we love here at Reconditioned. I'm such a fan of these toothpastes, and I would love you to give them a go. And no, they're not as cheap as Colgate, and for good reason. But you can get 10% off by visiting health.com/LaurenV10. That's health with an F, HEALF.com/LaurenV10. And that will apply a 10% discount to anything in your basket, not just wellness products. Please report back to me and let me know how you find these toothpastes. It's just fascinating. It's just absolutely fascinating. I mean, just so mind-boggling, and there's so many questions. Just one question I have heard you talking about your Maori heritage before, and I wonder how or if that has informed your work and your approach to this.
Well, I wasn't brought up with my dad. I didn't even know he was my dad till I was like 13. So I always wondered why I looked different than my sister. But I always thought my stepdad was my dad up until that point. So when I did meet my biological dad, he's a big Maori guy and he's quite famous in New Zealand. He's a Maori fisherman. He did a load of fishing shows and stuff. His name's Bill Hohepa, known for his giant moustache and giant eyebrows. And so interestingly, as so often happens, we have repeat cycles. So he didn't know his dad. And his dad was Maori, and he only got to meet him just before he died. So my father wasn't really brought up in a Maori family, and neither was I. However, I think because of what I do and because of being so fascinated with Indigenous cultures, there is a part of me that organically sort of feels into the collective of the wisdom here from the Maori in New Zealand. The essence is within me regardless.
Well, it's in the water memory of your own body, right?
But I like to say also that we are all brothers and sisters in many ways. We're all related to each other because water is the common thread throughout all of us. Not to forget, so on my mother's side, she was born in Devon, but my mother was part Russian, part Romani, part French, part English. On the other side, on my father's, he's part Scottish. And the Scottish aspect, apparently, if we go back far enough, I don't know how many great-great-grandfathers it was, but one of them was called Olaf the Black. He was a Viking, and he was the king of the Isle of Man. So,
Wow.
we have all this interesting, amazing history. Of course, the reason we even have it at all is because of this life force energy that we call water.
Yeah. Could you explain, because a lot of my listeners are interested in homeopathy. I'd love to hear from your perspective how homeopathy, because for me, it was fascinating to me as I got older to understand that homeopathy was based on kind of, the water memory. But can you explain it from your perspective now? You have such a deep understanding of water, how homeopathy is working, because I know that you write about it in your book, and we'll talk about your book in a moment. But if you could explain that would be fantastic.
Well, when I started working with homeopathy first, I would just put either just a little one drop of whatever the remedy was into the water. So it was highly diluted, even in the water. And so the outcome what I would see is, like I've already mentioned, the image of the actual plant it came from, or what it might be good for in the human body, like the heart or eyes or whatever. And I was looking at that and I'm thinking, well, this is very, very similar to the way that I view spirit. So if you come from any spiritual concepts, soul or spirit, someone may have said to you, well, the soul, the spirit, the subtle body leaves the body upon death. So, well, okay, how? If that's true, how? And one of the easiest explanations that I've that I've thought of is that, just to put into context, first, we know very little about water. I'm reiterating that. We know of 4 stages: a liquid, solid, gas, and then a type of gel or plasma. That type of gel or plasma is the water inside of our cells. It's H3O2, not H2O, so it has an extra hydrogen and oxygen atom. It has different properties. But within each different stage or phase of water, there are so many subtleties, and the secrets are always in the subtleties. For example, there are over 300 types of ice. Some of that ice is considered a mineral. Some of that ice is considered a rock based off the different properties that it has. So most people don't realize just how much complexity is even in one stage or one phase. The work in my technique is in the liquid crystal stage. It only takes about 5 minutes and 20 seconds, where I see liquid on top and ice underneath. I take it out, tip the liquid away, and photograph the crystallography. So that stage is in this 4th phase stage, the stage between a liquid and an ice and a solid, which is why I see such complex imagery. As ice freezes, it kind of clouds over all of that. And I see the 3 stages of freezing, because I've seen that water freezes in 3 stages: the liquid on top, ice underneath stage, the liquid, the sandwich stage, where there's two layers of ice and water in between, and then the solid, spirit, blood, and body. I haven't forgotten about the question. And so when I see that, what I see is that I think that spirit is, as it leaves the body, is able to do that through a water phase that we just have not discovered yet. I was speaking with Robert Edward Grant not long ago, and he said what I've been saying for years. He said mathematically there must be other stages that we don't know of. So is this an ether stage? Is this a vibrational vapor stage, which could be a possibility, or some other kind of gaseous stage? Yes, it's possible. But the observer is one aspect, one of many aspects of the spiritual nature of water. And when you ask someone who's had a near-death experience what happened, quite often, and I've asked many, quite often, not always, they will have a sense of rising if they really are and don't go straight to another stage. There is a stage straight as they're starting to go into that next stage, I suppose, where they have a sense of rising, and then they look upon their body as an observer. They do not recognize that's even their body. They just look, they just watch, they just say what they see. And we can all be the observer. We've probably had an experience of that in our lifetime, whether it's through meditation, whether we can just do it, or whether we have some kind of psychedelic experience. We can be the observer of the body whilst it's alive in the dream time. So how are any of that possible? I think that water in one of its spiritual stages literally is the observer. And when we come out of the body, we also lose all of the fears of the body, and we go into the observer space. It appears then you go on to another stage. After that, I don't know. But the consciousness of the body is able to kind of move with the water in this very special water state. So in Maori, the word for spirit is wairua. It means 2 waters. Essentially, it's really much more complex as this, but the physical and spiritual waters. And the physical waters we have some kind of understanding of, but the spiritual waters, I think we probably have even, I don't know, it's not that I think mentally we might not understand it, but we are it. And so that part is what connects, or it is the tapestry of life. And so with homeopathy, if it's a plant, for example, if you take an essence and you get it to the essence point, and and then you do all this dilution, what you're doing is essentially taking a living plant, and taking the essence or the spirit out of the plant. And as a gas rises, it expands, for example. So as the essence or the spirit of the plant leaves the plant and is diluted and diluted and diluted, it expands and expands and expands, because spirit is not contained in a body. And when it's in liquid form, it is fluid and is able to be even more expansive. To me, that's the most logical, straightforward reason that I think that homeopathy is so potent, and even more potent the more it's diluted, because it is holding the spirit of the plant or whatever is in there, this essence, which is so expansive and ever expanding.
Which is why the scientific community often can't understand it. When I was the trustee for Homeopathy UK, we were forever putting out fires with, skeptics on homeopathy, trying to debunk it in, massive national newspapers and different publications, because they're like, it's just nonsense, because once you dilute something, it's just a sugar pill. And your explanation really explains also why, because with homeopathy, the more it's diluted, so you've got the 30C and then you've got the 200C and then the 1M. And the 200 is 200 times more diluted, and yet that's more powerful than the 30. So it's interesting, and people often wonder why. Speaking of kind of scientific communities, are you working with any scientific communities? Are you affiliated yet with any universities? Because I can imagine there must be universities becoming interested in it. I know Emoto's work was very much kind of not accepted by the scientific community, but I think we're like making a headway with this stuff a bit now. Where are you with making headway with that with the scientific community?
Well, what's nice for me, and it's also the way I prefer to work, if I end up going fully scientific, I kind of lose a lot of my freedom, and I
Totally,
don't
yeah.
like that. And so what I do is openly share my technique. So I do have scientists working with it and investigating it. When I spoke at the last annual water conference 2 years ago, I was overwhelmed with so much attention from the scientific community. And Jerry Pollack said, "Look, just write this up. Get someone help you write this up scientifically, and we'll publish it, in his own publication called the Water Journal." I had two other people offer to publish my work scientifically, if I can just, write it all up. So, between all my tours and my book and the stuff, because I think that I I weave between worlds, between science, art, and consciousness. My nature is artistic. I love to speak and share in a way in which I hope, is easy for people to absorb. And the science, like Jerry Pollack said in the beginning of my book, this is what he says, and I think it's perfect, really. He says, "This is a wonderful blend of art and science. Some of the images are nothing short of amazing. Veda Austin has demonstrated how water responds to our thinking in ways that I and others would have thought unimaginable. And it now falls within the realm of science to see if we can explain what Austin has so beautifully demonstrated." So that's where I reach out. I'm not hiding anything, It's like, if this is something that people want to take up, please go ahead. Do the work. I am speaking in the scientific forum this year in Lisbon at the annual water conference. I've been told very, very clearly by my dear, and I love him to pieces, by Jerry Pollack, to be only sharing only the science. So it will be a half-hour presentation showing 64 examples of each hydroglyph with videos of how I get them and the whole process, very simply sharing the technique and going over the repeatability of what I have discovered.
So
So
no talk about vibrational vapor then.
no
Because I
vibration.
loved when you said that. That was something I really picked up on, vibration, like when the spirit leaves the body, it might be In a vibrational vapor. I mean, that's just really stuck with me.
Well, and that's what came out of me
Mm,
years ago, and that's stuck too. So that's why I keep saying
mm,
it. Because you
okay.
talk to some people, they kind of have sometimes seen what they describe as seeing spirit leave, and they often describe it in this kind of misty vapor-like stage. Um, I mean, to me, it's tangible.
Yeah.
It's logical because people have faith that their soul moves on.
Yeah.
They have faith in that. But I think that water explains it. I genuinely do. So I think the study on water in this next stage, I think it's so tangible that at some point, hopefully in the future, we'll be able to actually find a way to visibly see soul moving on.
Wow. My podcast is a lot about health and healing the body. I wonder if water's shown you anything about what we need to give our bodies, how we need to to feed our bodies.
I'll give you an example of something that I think is really interesting. Um, and my children taught it to me, and it does relate sort of to homeopathy in a way. So, years and years ago, because my children have grown up watching me do this work, and I had a particularly pretty dish that I was taking a photo of, and my daughter Shanti, who was probably 9 at the time or something, she said, "Oh, Mummy, can I have that?" So I gave her the dish because I thought she wanted to look at it. But she didn't really look at it. She started to eat the ice. And I said, "Oh, what are you doing?" And she said, "It's good for me, Mummy." I was like,
Mm.
"Really?" And so then a few weeks later, her brother Rama did the same thing, separate to Shanti. And I'm like, what do these children know that I don't know? And then over the years, I've taught many, many parents, and they've just come to me and said, my children are always eating the crystallography. And I said, well, what's going on? Because I observe patterns. So as a researcher, I actually, just to let people know, I was always wanting to be an archaeologist. So I was kind of studying to be that. My trajectory changed after my car accident, after having children, and after having discovered this thing with water. So I never expected really to go into this field. I was preparing to go into archaeology,
Wow.
just for people to understand that little bit. So my children were just showing me these amazing things. So when I was living in America with my husband, and he was doing a study on plant medicines. And so he wasn't using the physical plants or anything like that. What he was doing was he was using my technique in writing words. Um, and so he would write a word, put the dish on top of it for 30 seconds. People think it needs to be much longer because we have this idea that the longer something sits, the stronger the imprint. With water, it's quantum. Water knows what you're thinking before you even do it. Like that's happened to me so many times. Water isn't stuck in time and space. It's shown me things that will happen in the future and things that have happened in the past. I can give examples of that, but it might go too long. And again, it's in the book and we'll move on. So Brian, for 1 week, was using the word ayahuasca, and he would put the dish of water on top of the word, but he used a minute. He liked that. Put it in the dish, took it off the word, put it into the freezer, pulled it out, took a photo. And after that, he would eat the ice because he knew about what the kids were doing.
Right.
And so he did that 2 times a day because that's how many times he was taking the photos, because he actually helped me find a hydroglyph using the word visionary, based off his work with plant medicines. And after that week, he came to me and he said, I think I really need to take this seriously, because he'd started having lucid dreams. He started to, have very, very, very mild symptoms of just feeling like into a little bit of a journey. And he's not someone to exaggerate. It's not the kind of personality he is. He has quite a scientific approach to things, actually. So when he tells me something, he means it. So that was really interesting to me. And so I had a beginner's workshop the next day and I told them what had happened to him. And so I said, why don't you just start writing a word that comes out of the well of knowledge within you? Because we do have a well we can pull from. It doesn't necessarily have to be logical, but use the right word for you. And so, for example, a logical one might be maybe you're not sleeping well and you write the word rest. If that's the word, then great. Otherwise, maybe the word is something else, but you'll know it's right because we do have this inner knowing. And I think intuition is directly related to water as well. So write that word. Words have power. They have a potency. There's a collective information about words, but water doesn't read words. Let me just say that. It is not reading words. It is absorbing the energy from that word, reverse engineering it back into some kind of living principle that not only can we see and photograph, but we can embody by eating it.
Mm-hmm.
And so over the course of 2 years now, probably about 100 people have done this work. One lady did it for six months from having a terrible reaction to one of the shots and could barely even walk. And so she started with the word connection and kept that word for a month. And then the words changed as she started to get better. And now she's completely well. And the only other thing she did was some movement stuff and the inner work. We can't deny the inner work is really important. But her practice was to write whatever the word was and eat whatever the crystallography looked like. Just eat it. And she started to notice that the water started to taste sweeter. Her relationship with water improved. She actually started to feel better. And she started to notice things improving. But the water crystallography improved more and more and more until she kept seeing what we call the creation hydroglyph every time, which is one of the most complex and beautiful glyphs we have, based off the fact that her relationship had improved so much with herself, because this is all a mirror of who we are. And water isn't reading our negative aspect of potential, it's reading our positive aspect of potential, always waiting to move forward with that. Why I say that is that water doesn't design at all for me. If I am genuinely angry, frustrated, or even jealous, it will not design complex imagery. So it just compacts upon itself. It thickens. It doesn't design. So our brain can send all kinds of information about, and we can have all these emotions, but what I find is that water outside of a body, it's fascinating how it works, but it's not confined to fears and things like that. It just is a reflection of all of the human experience. But why I say I think that water is always reading our best potential is because that seems to be the more of its nature. We just have to step into it.
So yeah, because it's my son's got sensory issues with food, and what we started doing about a year and a half ago is I spent the first few years being extremely stressed and anxious about it because he wasn't eating any healthy foods or any of the things that I wanted to give him. And based on my history of, healing and understanding nutrition, it felt even more severe. And so a friend of mine suggested that I start talking to the food. And so I did. And I now speak to his food and I say, please let this nourish him, regardless of whether it's, store-bought packet fish fingers, whatever it is, because I believe that the energy, that everything holds a vibrational frequency, including food. Now, I do believe that processed foods and certain foods, animals that have been treated in a bad way or have, ingested lots of chemicals throughout the rearing of the animals will hold a lower vibration and therefore affect our bodies in a different way. And perhaps that is through the memory of the water in that food. But that's why it's so interesting to me about how the water affects the nourishment of our bodies.
Mm. Well, it's interesting. I mean, we talked a lot about talking to food, talking to water today. But some of the stuff I've worked with a lot of biological fluids as well, and that includes saliva. And so when you essentially say a word or a sentence and then you spit into the dish, because I'm trying to collect saliva to see what we might see as in the freezing stages, we actually see things relative, little designs relative to the last word you spoke.
Mm.
And what it's not this in the same way as in the clear liquid stage, but you do still see, for example, the number 8. I was talking about the number 8. I thought, okay, that seems good. And so when it freezes in bubbles. The bubbles freeze in saliva. And I literally got this perfect little number 8, like it had been stamped into the top of the bubble. And I also got like a little boat, because we'd been talking about sailing. We'd just little tiny images. And so I really do think that the last word we spoke has a resonance within it that is holding that information. So when you drink water after saying thank you, you are welcoming the ancestor in. So I don't think it's all, I think it's a lot of what we have as an idea is around the wrong way. For example, we're going outward looking for water to heal us. Heal me, do it. I'm going to get the best water. It's like, yes, it's going to heal me. But we actually have to start to figure out, just switch it around. So of all the water in the world, only 2%, I'm not talking about the primary water inside the Earth's mantle, I'm just separating that for now. But the water onto the surface of Earth is only about 2% that we can drink. That water's managed to find its way into your glass for a reason. It's not a coincidence that it's there. And that water is like an ancestor. It's been through the trees, it's been through the clouds, it's been through the earth, it's been through the animals, it's been through life, and it's found its way to you. And how will you receive it? How you receive it is how it will respond inside of you. So if all you have and all you can afford is filtered tap water, and you are grateful for it, the way in which you receive it is going to help you far, far more than if you just ignore it. If someone came and knocked on your door and it was this long lost ancestor so excited to see you, and you just like don't even care, that's not going to make that person feel like cared about or missed. I mean, we don't even know that we miss water yet. One day we will. Some people know because they have to walk for miles to get it. We are in the first world issues right here, where we can even ask, what kind of water do I drink? And again, this is relational. So just bearing in mind that there is a resonance within the mouth in the saliva, and saliva is the first fluid that anything you eat or drink is touching. So it's the welcome committee, literally. And so rather than it being about what water can do for you, it's more about, well, what can I do for this water to make it feel welcome? And when we get more comfortable with welcoming things into us, because we don't even think about that apple, for example, is going to become us. So what do we want to be for that apple, rather than what is that apple going to do for me? And when I was flying, because I flew through the last few crazy years we've had to the States, because Ryan couldn't get to New Zealand because the whole border thing was nuts. Anyway, I was sitting next to this woman, and she had a cold, and she was coughing, she was sniffing, and everybody was like in the plane, it was like she was the target.
Oh,
Like, oh,
shame.
you're going to kill us all. And I could feel her, like she felt so like distressed. And I was sitting right next to her. And there was a part of me that went, oh God, I hope I don't get sick. You know, I thought that, if I'm honest. And then I thought, you know better than this. And then I thought, just switch this around, because this is not your power is not with her.
Mm.
Your power is with you. And so I'm like, okay, what can I do for you? Can I get you some water? You know, can I give you some Reiki? Can I, can I make you feel more comfortable? And she was so grateful, because she
Mm.
felt so, you know, terrible. She started to feel better. By the end of the trip, she actually managed to get some sleep, and she woke up feeling a lot better. I knew the moment I shifted my view that I was not going to get sick.
Mm-hmm.
It was a limited perspective on my part. It was a knee-jerk reaction from limitations of being told how things work over the many years.
Mm-hmm.
I did know better, and I changed it to, what can I do for you?
Mm.
I do this with water now as
Mm.
well. What can I do to make your experience better? You know, it's like we are the guests in this world, like we're the hosts in many ways. It's like, well, welcome. What can I do? How can I help you? You know, and then you find people just naturally reciprocate, because you've made their life just a little bit better.
Mm.
And so I think that that's really an important piece to remember, because that means and reminds us that we're not powerless with our
Yeah,
environment. We we can make it better.
I absolutely agree with that. We're the masters of our destiny.
Mm.
So the last question I want to ask you before we talk about your book is, I mean, you mentioned, it's more about the thought and the intention we put into whatever water we are drinking. But if we do have a choice, I'm living in London, I'm not living near any springs. What is the best water I can drink? I know that, I get questions every day through to my DMs. What's the best water system? Some people say add minerals, some people say don't, some people say reverse osmosis, some people say no. And I wonder what your opinion is on this, because we've got the option of tap water that we can put systems into to make it better. We don't really have any springs around, or even options to, import spring water from somewhere, because it's just too expensive and difficult. So what would be the ideal solution for someone living in an urban environment?
Well, there is a website called Find a Spring. People often don't think that there's a spring anywhere close to them, and then they're surprised. So many springs in England. Um, And I think London actually does have springs around it, but people maybe not know where they are. So I'd say go to that website and see if there really is a spring close to you, because I do
Mm.
think that that's a wonderful way. Now, the area of all the different types of ways of, making water purified and things like that. I mean, I've done crystallography with many of them. And I think it's up to you and have preference. I would say go and check out Isabel Friend's website. She has she really does good advice, I think. She recommends something called Spring Aqua, which is a whole house system. And it's very, very natural, and it works very efficiently. That I know a couple of people in the world of water that really love that. Um, and when we were in America, I lived in the desert. All we had was reverse osmosis, and it made the water, drinkable. I met what's his name, Robert Slovak, recently, who was the designer of reverse osmosis. Um, he knows what he's talking about. So that, but if that's your only source of drinking water, personally, then I would mineralize it, because I don't use distilled water in any of my work. And the reason why not is that I just don't see complex imagery. I just see a sort of signature pattern of reverse
Mm.
osmosis. Or so um, and just distilled water, I don't see any complex imagery in that because it lacks the salts and minerals.
Mm.
So I think it's the salts and minerals that help the water store information for longer.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
like distilled water is like the observer only,
Mm.
whereas spring water or any water with minerals in it is sort of like has the observer as well as the active participant.
Hmm.
So yeah, find like even some people say that the Celtic salts can be really, really great to add to water. I sometimes like to make Soleil, which is where you get the best or organic salt in the biggest chunks you can get, and then you fill a jar up and you fill it, I'm sorry, so you fill it a quarter of the way in the jar, and then you fill the rest of the jar with the best water you can get. And you just leave it for a few days. Sometimes it only takes a day. There should be just like a residue of the salt, which means the water's absorbed as much salt as it possibly can.
Mm.
Now, that liquid you've got is what's called Soleil. And when you take a teaspoon of the Soleil and you add it to a large glass of water, or even just to a liter of water, that will give your water a wonderful vibration. It
Mm.
helps water to store original information. I've got a whole little PDF called uh, I think it's the marriage of salt and water. Um, but no, I called that one "The Secret is in the Salt." The secret's in the
Okay.
salt. And so I talk a lot about what I've discovered around making Soleil. And there's this quote, and I hope I remember it, by one of the Greek philosophers. And he was saying that salt is the most perfect marriage of water and sun. And
Mm.
so I think magical about salt.
Yeah.
So I could talk about salt for a long time, but I'll leave it because
We
we
actually
run.
talk about salt a lot on this podcast. I'm big on minerals, and I add Celtic salt to everything, including my water. And I'm
Mm.
a big yeah, mentee of Morley Robbins, who advocates for minerals. So I'm big on remineralizing water. So I appreciate that response from you. So tell us about the book. The book launches tomorrow.
The book launches tomorrow.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So it'll go globally live at the end of my tomorrow in New Zealand.
Right.
Um, it's the 29th tomorrow in New Zealand. So the global launch is the 29th at, I believe, something like 8 a.m. your morning on the 29th.
Yeah.
So
Well,
this is
this is going to be released a few weeks after we're recording this. So
oh, okay,
everyone listening, the book is out now.
now. So this is my book, The Living Language of Water. And
Beautiful.
so it has over 1,500 pictures,
Stunning.
300 pages. It covers water, the science, it covers the art, it covers the spirit, consciousness, indigenous wisdom. How does water respond to EMFs and frequencies? It has a huge music section with all different genres of music. There's a homeopathy chapter. It goes into the power of thoughts, the power of words. There are touches on the hydroglyphs. It gives examples of other people's work, which is really important. I have had a couple of people, a quantum physicist, as well as a couple of other doctors write in the science section. My friend Isabel Friend, she wrote something about the spirit of water, which she believes is hydrogen. And hydrogen actually means the creator of water, hydro and gen. But personally, and I think we're all on this learning journey, I tend to think the spirit of water is condensed light because anyway, won't get into that. So yeah, lots and lots of chapters in there, and it's a decade's worth of my work. So I'm not supporting Amazon, so you won't find it on Amazon. I have got 3 printers, one in New Zealand, one in America, and one in the UK. So if you're not from those areas, you just basically click on the country closest to you and it will be sent out to you. So it is available to everyone. And I'm supporting printers that are smaller, but they are not compromising on quality. And so there's a much more personal touch to it. So yeah, I'm very, very happy. And at the very back, it's got the guide as to how to do the technique as well.
Oh, I love that. That's amazing. So you are also going on tour and you're going to be in the UK. I know you're going to be in other places as well, but for our mainly UK listeners, I'm going to put the details in the show notes so people can see when you're here, which is going to be in September, the end of September, beginning of October, right?
Yes, very, very end of September in the UK, all the way through until about the 18th of October. So I'm touring all over the UK, even going to Scotland as well. So yeah, I love the UK. So tickets sell really fast. So I highly recommend people get in there before they miss out. That happened
Absolutely.
last year. It was wild. It was so humbling that so many people wanted to come and hear me talk.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I'm hoping to be able to come to the Surrey one. So we'll put the details of that in the show notes and hopefully people can grab their tickets before they're all snapped up. Thank you so much. This has been one of the most enlightening conversations, and I'm so grateful for your time. I'm grateful for your book. I'm grateful for this decade's worth of work that you've done that's giving us so much insight into consciousness. I think really like water is expressing consciousness, and you're becoming the facilitator for us understanding that. So thank you so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I received that with lots of love.
Thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Reconditioned. I am honestly so grateful to each and every person that tunes in. Thank you also for taking responsibility for your own well-being. You should know that just by choosing to listen to podcasts like this that further your well-being, you're moving more deeply into abundance consciousness. Now, don't forget, I have a bunch of free resources over at laurenvakneen.co.uk, as well as every recommendation you could ever need in regards to your well-being on the LV Recommends page, all categorized for your ease. Thank you also to our sponsors. These episodes would not be possible without them, so make sure to check them out and get some pretty awesome discounts on the show notes. And of course, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast so that you can get updated each time a new one is released. Thank you. I appreciate you.